And hello, 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 hello. Are we all here? I have I got a 13x return on a stock. I made over $100,000. It was the biggest investing mistake of my life. I've talked to you guys about this before, but today I'm going to tell you specifically what the mistake was, why I made the mistake, how my philosophy changed, how to avoid that mistake yourself in the future, and how to avoid the opposite mistake that we haven't really talked about. How to think about applying this to AI investing. Are you ready? Let's go. Okay. Thanks everybody so much for watching. This is Warren Redlick. The story is that I bought Amazon. I bought Amazon stock in 2013. What I saw was I was an early adopter. I was using Amazon Prime and I was into it. And I noticed, wow, I'm buying a lot of stuff on Amazon and I'm an early adopter. I recognized that I was an early adopter. And I thought, if I'm an early adopter, other people are going to get into this and it's going to get a lot bigger. So I saw that. I think a lot of people missed that. I think a lot of people missed other things. And I realized there's an opportunity here. And I bought some stock. I didn't see everything. I didn't see Amazon Web Services coming. But I wanted to let you know this is where it started. This is, I started forming conviction about Amazon as a stock by my experience as a consumer using Amazon and saying, this is different, this is going to be big. And my initial investment was a good decision. And, obviously I got a 13x, right? My initial investment decision was good in that sense. But the real mistake was not that I bought Amazon. The mistake was not continuing to research, not continuing to build conviction. And I'm going to explain more about that shortly, and not investing more. Ultimately, knowing what I know now and what I should have realized along the way, I should have invested more money. And there's a couple things that kept me from doing that. I've talked to you guys about this before. Lips aren't matching talk here. I don't know how to deal with that. I think that might just be Mark Potashnik. I don't know. I don't think there's a, let's see if there's something in my settings. Thank you, Mark. Stream, audio. I don't see anything, Mark. I don't know. I don't know how to fix that now. I can't fix that while I'm live. So I appreciate that and I wish I could fix it, but I can't. So we're gonna have to deal with it. Oh, I'm in sync for you. Thank you, 14.4. So what Amazon did after I made my investment, thank you, Steve. What Amazon did after I made my investment was Amazon Web Services grew huge. That's not something I saw. The Prime ecosystem got bigger than I expected. It's not something I was paying that much attention to. They developed a logistics moat. That's not something I noticed. I was they had operating leverage that I wasn't paying attention to. They developed market dominance that I became aware of, but I didn't invest more. And the reason I didn't invest more was I had an arbitrary cap in my mind on my portfolio at the time. I had a rule, I'm not going to have more than X% of my portfolio in any one stock. So when I did my first investment, I bought all the way to the cap, and then Amazon grew and it grew above the cap. So rather than thinking, oh, this is an opportunity, I should dive into this more, I should think about investing more in this company, I stopped thinking about it. I wasn't really researching it thoroughly. I wasn't trying to build more conviction to understand what was happening. Like, if you guys know me from Tesla, like, I started investing in Tesla, I started paying more attention to Tesla. I started investing more in Tesla, I started diving more into Tesla. I'm looking at SpaceX, I'm looking at related companies, I'm looking at other EV companies. I really dove in to really understand Tesla once I got going. I didn't make that decision with Amazon. I didn't follow that approach with my Amazon investment, which is 2013. It started growing. I started buying Tesla in 2016 and my conviction was there. But I didn't apply the same thinking to Amazon. And I didn't probably exceed the cap on my Tesla stock until 2017, 2018. So the problem is that arbitrary rules like a X% cap on your portfolio can become an intellectual stop sign. The issue isn't caution itself, it's that I failed to keep learning, I failed to keep studying, I failed to keep researching. So there's this balance here, though, between caution and recklessness. I don't want you guys to think I'm saying, okay, if you buy into a stock, If you buy into a stock, then just go crazy, make it 50% of your portfolio, go all in. You don't want to invest too much money before you truly understand what you're investing in. So, like with Tesla, I started buying in February 2016, and I kept buying and buying and buying as I was researching and studying and paying more attention. And cash would free up from another transaction, and I would put it in Tesla. But all along the way, I'm researching Tesla. I'm trying to understand Tesla. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And by the way, I, I'm not following my rules. I said there's a rule. I'm not following my rules. I'm supposed to be following my rules here. So the point is that it's conviction, not you only live once. You don't want to invest too much before you truly understand it. So um, the evolving framework that I'm at now is when you start seeing something, maybe you take a small initial position, maybe you don't take any position at all, but you see something you think you've got, and now you've got to do research and you got to do ongoing research. You got to continue your due diligence. You got to grow your conviction. And if something happens along the way that interferes with that conviction, you got to stop, right? You don't keep going on something you don't believe in. And what I've done with Tesla and what I'm starting to do with a couple other stocks that we'll talk about later is I'm gradually increasing my investment in those other stocks. If you, as you start believing more and more, you start becoming more and more convinced this is real, then you start investing more. I think if you really become solidly convinced this is it, because at a certain point on Tesla, I became solidly convinced and I was an all in investor for a long time. I've now, let me just address this point because it's going to come up later. I was all in Tesla. I had no other stocks. And the reason was I hadn't seen another stock that I thought had the potential to grow the way I see Tesla having the potential to grow. As I've been researching AI, I'm now seeing other stocks that I'm starting to believe in. That's so now I am selling a little bit of Tesla. I still have probably 90+% Tesla, but I'm selling a little bit of Tesla and buying a couple other things. And now hopefully I've got some more revenue coming in. I want to sell Tesla to buy other things. We'll see. Um, so uh sorry, I'm working on a new system here. I want you to think about the idea of conviction scaling. My current process is identify promising transformational companies early. And I'm not that early on AI, right? Like everybody's already sees the AI companies, but as soon as you can identify promising transformational companies, start small, learn. I'm researching this stuff constantly. If you watch my channel, AI Stocks Report, I'm constantly talking about what I'm learning about these. The vision of this channel is I am on a learning journey to understand more about AI and AI companies and AI stocks, so that number one, I understand what's happening in society, but also so I can become a better investor in AI stocks. So if you stay with me on this channel, you'll learn along with me. Maybe you'll learn something I don't learn, and you'll share it with me in the comments or in the chat. You'll send me an email, whatever. People send me emails all the time, and we learn more about these things. And we want to understand the transformational technologies that are evolving. And as those technologies are evolving, your understanding should evolve too. You've got to learn, you've got to grow. We're going to be talking later in this video about Gavin. The hell's his last name? Gavin. I'll remember his name later. He was on the All In pod. He was on another pod, and he's like this big VC, and he's talking about this stuff, and he's giving his perspective. And I was watching the All In pod, and Chamath is giving his perspective, and I've learned enough that some of the things they say, like, I don't think they've got that right. Can you get to the point where you stop listening to what talking heads like Warren say, and you start developing your conviction about here's what's really going on? So too many investors diversified too fast. I did well on a stock. I'm taking profits on the stock. I'm not researching to see, is this stock going to continue to grow? You trim your winners too early and you never let your conviction compound. That's a big mistake. So in a future by the way, in a future video, I'm going to talk about how to identify winners and, more important, how to screen out losers. You guys know I called Lucid a long time ago. I called Aptera. Um, I'm calling Figure now. They're not even publicly traded yet, but I'm calling Figure now. I think there's things that you can see in these companies. And so number one, you want to be able to figure out who's likely to be a winner and how do I get in on that? Gavin Baker, yes, thank you. Who's likely to be a winner and how do I get in on that? And how do I build conviction that I'm right, that this is going to be a winner? And then, there's this other really good story, and they've got good pictures, and they got good PDFs, and this guy I watch and trust. He went and visited their factory, and he's saying all these good things about them. This all happens. There's this classic moment where Omar from Whole Mars blog or Whole Mars catalog is invited to the Nikola Motors factory to meet with, or whatever the facility is, to meet with Trevor Milton, he and a few other people. And Omar realizes it, and he turns and looks at the camera. He realizes the guy's a bullshitter. Most of the influencers never don't have the bullshit filter. They don't have the bullshit detector. Omar has this one of the things I love about Omar is he has the bullshit detector. I hope you can see that I have the bullshit detector. And you have to watch for that. Yes, 14.4. I think Aptera might be in trouble. So my current focus right now, I'm looking at, if you follow the AI stocks report, I'm following several companies. I'm looking really close at NVIDIA and Google. I'm building conviction in NVIDIA and Google. And it's not hard to build conviction in NVIDIA and Google. Although there's a lot, even Gavin Baker has been somewhat critical of Google, right? It's pretty obvious that NVIDIA is easy to build conviction in, but it's not trading very expensively for what it's doing. I continue to focus on Tesla. I'm focusing more on SpaceX is about to go public. I've dove really deep on SpaceX. If you look at my channel, I did a video about that. Um, yeah, I have a Ron Barron video. I think I have two Ron Barron videos. Yes, Stephen Mark Ryan also has the bullshit detector. He does. So I'm continuing to focus on Tesla and growing my focus on SpaceX, XAI, etc. There's layers to the AI stack that you should understand. This is a Jensen Huang thing. You've got the application. My layers, by the way, my layers are not the same as Jensen's layers. The way I look at it is a little different than the way Jensen looks at it. But you can, if you're choosing on who to believe about who understands AI better, you'd probably better go with Jensen than me. But his vision is applications are like products, agents, and co-pilots. Models, we all know the foundation models, machine learning systems. Infra is data centers, the way he has it. Chips and energy. Now, I would put energy and the people who make the things that go into chips all in an infrastructure layer. Energy is part of the infrastructure. Lithography machines at ASML, Carl Zeiss Optics, all of that is in the infrastructure layer for me. The chip layer is NVIDIA and AMD and Broadcom. And to some extent, the chip fabs, TSML, not to some extent, the chip fabs, TSMC and Samsung are the big chip fabs. You got to fit the memory makers in there somewhere, probably put them in the chip layer. The model layer is, the Anthropic, the OpenAI, the Grok, and then the applications layers like Palantir and Tesla and Anduril, right? So I don't share the exact same view of the layers as he does, but he has a good model. It's not wrong to look at it his way. But my point is that I'm looking at all up and down the stack, trying to understand every level of the stack. I'm expanding. You'll see later. I'm expanding to like talk more about the second tier, and obviously as the pre-IPO companies become public companies, then they'll enter we'll start looking at their stocks, not just the companies. So you got to study everything, supply chain infrastructure, whatever. And then you have to decide, where is my conviction growing over time? Which of these companies do I believe in more? Which it's not even necessarily, because for me, like I think all these companies are going to grow. The question, and it's going to be a future video, is who's going to win? It's not who's going to win, it's who's going to win more. So um to me, AI resembles earlier tech waves. There's a lot of uncertainty, I don't actually have that much uncertainty. There's a lot of uncertainty in the market. There's a lot of skepticism in the market. And we're looking at what appears to be exponential change. You look at Anthropic's growth, you look at OpenAI's growth, you look at what XAI, SpaceX, XAI are doing with data centers. There's a lot of places, the hyperscalers, how quickly they're building their data centers, all these things that are happening. You're seeing exponential growth. Um, so I think the question that becomes challenging for people is, can you build conviction during rapid change? Because things are happening really fast. I'm still early in this process myself. It's motivated me to focus my content. I don't just make videos about, what did Drew Baglino say, or what did Lars Moravi say about Cybertruck today, right? I'm not making very limited videos about little things about Tesla now. As a broader story here, and making these videos is really partly like preparing for the videos helps me educate myself. I'm learning more because I'm doing this. So Oh, thank you, Mark. Thank you for that gift membership to someone. Thank that's very kind of you. Um, there's some key psychological lessons here. The biggest investing mistakes are not always losses. Sometimes the biggest mistake is being right too cautiously, and the challenge is balancing openness, skepticism, concentration, and humility. Investing is not static. It's not like you're not looking at everything is changing fast. So your conviction has to evolve as reality unfolds. Like right now, I think that Google may be the best bet in AI. And Gavin Baker said something in a podcast a couple days ago that made me think, oh, I got to look into that closer. I researched what Gavin Baker said about Google to make me think about, am I wrong about Google here? Is there something going on here? I'm not saying he said Google's in trouble. It's just he said something there that caught me. So we're looking at a path forward. Okay. And you don't want to be too cautious and you don't want to be too reckless. So that's the challenge in this game, really, is there's, I don't know if it's a middle path and it's not necessarily a straight line. I didn't put in the graphic here, I didn't put a straight line. Like there's a green line that goes sort of like straight ahead up there, but it wiggles. The paths move. Everything's changing fast. So it's a real challenge going forward. So I want to ask you what you think in the chat. Feel free to do this. I prepared some questions that you should ask me. So I'm going to do my answers to the questions you should be asking me, and we'll see what other questions you guys come up with. The first thing is, how do you tell the difference between growing conviction and irrational attachment? Where's the bias? Is it your ego? Are you validating your thesis? Are you researching to persuade yourself you're right, or are you researching to find out where you might be wrong? Are you investing emotionally, or are you investing rationally? And there's things I remember years ago I would look at. If you go into the back of like the annual filings, you would see the dilution, the potential. How much have they allocated for stock that's going to be paid out to employees, let's say? And how much does that and if you're anticipating the company's going to grow 40%, but they're going to be handing out 50% of the equity in stock, then you're actually going to go backwards. Right? That's an example. You want to look at all the details and you want to see what's going on here. So I really think this is one of the most important things, that a lot of people fall in love with a company like Aptera. Okay. If you're not familiar with Aptera, Aptera makes, or shouldn't say makes, Aptera is theoretically going to make a three-wheeled, super aerodynamic car, two-seat car with solar panels built into it that in theory will be more efficient than Cybercab, let's say, and it will cost about the same as a Model 3. Um, they've repeatedly pushed back deadlines. They've never made a product that they've sold to a consumer. And so at some point, you got to say, wait a minute, you know, when are they going to deliver on something that's persuasive, right? They tell a good story. They make great pictures. They've done a couple of fun demos that turned out, there were red flags in their demos. Um, Lucid Motors. I called Lucid Motors at the reveal. They said they were going to have journalists ask questions, and then they never let the journalists ask questions. They did a presentation and they made claims that I didn't think were credible, and it was too flashy. It was too smooth. It was too professionally done. And I don't think it's always easy to figure out what exactly you're looking for. Your bullshit meter should be going off, right? You should be like, is this guy credible? Like, actually, there was a recent presentation by the Anthropic CFO, and I thought the guy was full of crap. I watched, it was a podcast or something. He's talking. I was like, way too many buzzwords. Some of the stuff didn't sound credible. I'm skeptical about Anthropic. There's a lot of good stuff happening with Anthropic that overwhelms my skepticism to an extent, but I can't invest in Anthropic yet. Um, I'm not sure how much of Anthropic is like their Mythos reveal. They announced Mythos, and then they said we're not going to release it to the public yet. We're going to let the big corporations and the government see it first. It's like the reality was they didn't have the compute to deliver Myth. They still don't have the compute, even with SpaceX compute. They don't have enough compute to run the model at scale. So there's you can't I can't invest in Anthropic anyway. So it's not like it's that level of a red flag yet. I'm not thinking about it that much, but I'm dubious about Anthropic. I think the CEO is a little questionable. There's some other things. 14.4 says, I hope Rivian can pull it out with the R2. So Rivian's an example. Like, look how much money they put in. Have they lived up to deadlines they set for themselves? How close have they come? This is one of those things where people, they're looking for the next Elon, right? They're looking at Peter Rawlinson at Lucid Motors or RJ Scaringe at Rivian and saying, we're looking for the next Elon. There is no next Elon. There's no, they're not the next Elon. The guy at Aptera is not the next Elon. There's no next Elon. There's one Elon. Does the guy have a track record of being able to deliver? Right? I'm not saying you can't invest in a company like that, but don't invest a lot unless you've built conviction. Like, we're heading towards a world of self-driving cars, and people aren't going to buy cars anymore. And you want to invest in a company that's making cars that's not really competitive with Tesla. Well, that's Tesla's already saying we're going to stop making cars. We're going to stop selling cars soon. Tesla makes better cars than Rivian is planning to make, and they're planning to stop selling cars. So it's like, was it Lemonade Insurance? Some of my friends love Lemonade Insurance. It's like, well, if you go to a world of self-driving cars, there's no car market, there's no car insurance anymore. No meaningful car insurance anymore. So you really have to put your things in. Rivian R2 shipped? Are they shipping at scale or do they ship a few? Yeah, goalposts keep moving. That's another really good example. Um, there's another big question that you should be asking me. And I'm probably the wrong person to be asked this question, but how concentrated is too concentrated? How much do you need to diversify? Should you be following the classic portfolio theory? Should you just buy indexes? How do you manage risk? Manage risk. So I, for a long time, was all in Tesla. Now, before I really started investing in Tesla, and I had my arbitrary rule, a lot of my investments were in mutual funds that were broadly diversified, and I allowed myself to pick some stocks, and I picked a few, and I had some good successes along the way. I bet on some Cisco systems competitors, like small companies that were similar to Cisco, but Cisco had an outrageous PE ratio, and these smaller companies looked good, and they had good PE ratios, and they didn't have too much dilution. F5 Networks and Foundry Networks and maybe Juniper Networks or something like that. I made good money on all of these, and I had a good run on Apple, but I got out too early. And they were all like relatively small investments that did well. Um, and then when it came to Tesla, all of a sudden it was like, I can't see another company I want to invest in besides Tesla. I see the growth. And of course, it turned out really well for me, right? Because I started investing in 2016. I had a lot by 2020, and then it went up, I don't know, 40x from when I started. I think I got a 43x from when I started. Some ridiculous number from the first investment, not all the investments. But so I think that one of my rules is if you don't have a stock, an individual stock that you have conviction in, then you should be broadly diversified in something like an S&P 500 ETF or similar investment is a good investment. If you identify a company that you really start to believe in, then you invest 5% in that company, you start to believe in it more, 10%, you start taking money out of your index fund or your mutual fund and you start putting, this is what I did, and then you start investing more. And if it grows, you're violating your rule. Once it grows, you put 10% of your money in one company and then it triples. Now it's much more than 10% of your portfolio. If let's suppose you had a 10% rule, now it's much more than 10% of your portfolio. So the gut level reaction is, okay, I got enough. This is what I did with Amazon. I'm not going to invest anymore. It's like, well, if you're still researching and you're still building conviction and you think this company's going to 10x in the next 5 years, well, then you should still be buying it even if it's up more. And that's a challenge to figure that out. And then where I'm at now is for a long time, I was like, Tesla's clearly the best investment. I can't see anything else I want to buy. And as I'm developing my understanding of AI, I'm starting to say, wait a minute, this AI thing's going to take off. Let me look more into these AI companies. And there's this layers, and you'll see later in this video, I'll do my weekly report on AI stocks. Okay, and I have my own specific method of evaluating long-term call options. So you can, if you're a X subscriber or a YouTube channel member or a Patreon supporter, you get access to my options video. So that's another way of helping me figure it out. But just looking at PE ratio is a really simple example of it. And then you start figuring out, okay, where do I want to put my money? Where's the most opportunity for growth? And yet, I'm not saying I have all the answers. That's something that I'm working toward on this channel. And it doesn't have to be AI. You could be looking at some other field and you see some company that you think is brilliant and you're going to invest in that. Go for it. Yes, Buffett and Munger were opposed to diversification in general. Pick a few companies that you believe in, and it might be 10 companies. For them, they had a lot of companies. So another question that you might ask me. Wait. We have a chat comment here. Good morning, sir. I'm really getting more and more quantum stocks. I'm not familiar with quantum stocks, so I can't comment on that. I'm not even sure what you mean by quantum stocks. Maybe you're talking about a company that's developing a quantum computing chip. There's another company. What's it called? Cerebras. Gavin Baker was talking about Cerebras. He's an investor in Cerebras. I don't get Cerebras. I'm not saying it's not a good investment. It's like I don't. I think I've looked at it carefully enough to say I'm not persuaded that's going to win. Gavin Baker's got a bet on it. It's not 100% of his portfolio. It's probably a few percent of his portfolio. He believes in it. I look at Cerebras, which is they make one big wafer that's one monster chip. And there's a fairly narrow use case for it where it might be really good. I don't know. Quantum computing, I don't know enough. I don't see enough. I'm not convinced that quantum computing is a good investment yet. So that's a tough one. But if you see it and you do your research and just make sure you have your bullshit meter on, look closely and think carefully about it. Brooks says, "Hey Warren, what do you think about investing in defense contractors given many of the world's nations are rebuilding their militaries like Lockheed, Boeing, RTX, etc." Well, in the AI stocks report, I track Palantir and I track Anduril. Palantir is a stock. Anduril is a privately held company that's probably going to IPO in the next year or two. Those are both effectively defense contractors. Palantir does more to defense contracting, but they are a defense contractor. SpaceX is a defense contractor. I think that defense contractors are potentially a good investment, but it depends on which one. Like, are they making technology that's out of date, or are they making new technology that's being adopted? That's a really good question. Yeah, S&P 500 index is a good bet if you don't have companies you believe in. Once you have companies you believe in and you've built your conviction, then you might step back from your S&P 500 index fund and start saying, I don't need to invest in that anymore. I've got conviction in these companies and I've got enough. For me, Tesla alone was enough. So, how do you know when a stock deserves a larger position over time? I think the first thing is you want to build conviction by researching and building evidence, both to persuade yourself that it's going to grow and to look for things that should make you say no. You have to look for things that are going to make you say no. Honestly, like as a Tesla fan, there is an endless source of criticism of Tesla. We call it FUD. And people think we're like in a bubble and we just listen to other no, we are constantly dealing with people criticizing Tesla. If you are one of the OGs, the Stephen Mark Ryans, the Whole Mars catalog, Rob Mauer, um, so many of us dealt with so many people lying about Tesla constantly. Jim Chanos is another one, the big investor who shorted Tesla. You want to look very carefully at their criticism. It's actually a blessing in a way to have had all that criticism. That's probably one of the things that really hardened my conviction was I looked at the strongest criticism of Tesla and I said, they got nothing. Okay, so let's see. Tesla Geek says, watch the most recent pot of moonshots. The CEO of Cerebras was on. Seems very credible. That's great. Okay, so the CEO, this is a perfect example. Thank you so much for bringing that up. The CEO of Cerebras seems very credible. Okay, I don't think they have a track record. I think they're like a PhD researcher type or something like that. I don't think they've started up other companies before. My problem with Cerebras isn't whether they're good. My problem is there a market for what they do? How big is that market? I'm not convinced I'm not saying there isn't a market for what they do. I just like, I looked into it. I gave it hours, 5 hours of digging into Cerebras because somebody else brought it up. I looked at, and I don't see it. That doesn't mean I'm right. I didn't build conviction in it. I didn't have any red flags. It's like fundamentally came to this question. I don't know if the market for what they're building is big enough. And I don't know how hard it is to go to the next level with that technology. They have a huge problem with yield, by the way. There's a technological problem with getting yield on a large wafer. So there's a whole bunch of things that I'm not sure about. There's an advantage in that they have all the chips are able to communicate with each other at much higher bandwidth because they're all on the same wafer. Right? I understand the advantage, but I just like, is that there's problems with it. Does that work at scale? Is there a market for that at scale? I'm not convinced. I think I think that, and you can't. I don't think you. I don't even know. I don't think they're publicly traded yet. So, um, thank you, Carolina. Carolina. Um, so how do you know when a stock deserves a larger position over time? You want to build evidence, you want to build conviction, you want to look for red flags, you want to look at, are they executing? This is a big one. Um, I think in today's AI world, you don't have to say, almost don't have to execute. Not sure how you can say Tesla has nothing. Who said Tesla has nothing? Did I miss that? Oh, there's a question Grokdex asks, am I selling Tesla for SpaceX? So, um, I don't know if I'm going to get an allocation to SpaceX stock. I submitted the appropriate stuff with my broker to get notified when there's an opportunity. When there's an opportunity, I will submit a request. I believe I will get some access to SpaceX stock. My guess is that I will not be able to get more than $50,000 in SpaceX stock, and it might be a lot less than that. And the question is whether I would sell Tesla stock in order to buy it. If I sell $50,000 in Tesla stock, I'm happy to say that's not a large share of my Tesla stock. That is a very small. That is a fairly small percentage of my Tesla stock. So yes, I might sell Tesla stock to buy SpaceX. I am hoping through not just content creation, but other things I'm doing, that I'm going to start generating more revenue and not have to, because I use Tesla stock to fund my lifestyle. Again, I don't have to sell that much, but I spend money out. I sell Tesla to fund my living expenses. Um, I'm hoping to generate enough revenue that I don't have to do that anymore. And so if I can buy it, I will. I didn't say Tesla has nothing. I'm still very heavily invested in Tesla. Um, so is the company a market leader? Do they have a solid position in the market? Do they have a niche? Um, Are people adopting the product? What's their infrastructure like? What's their supply chain management like? Supply chain management is huge. Like, one of the big things that's going on that people don't see with all these hyperscalers, with all these companies, is supply chain is very fragile. I made a video about this very recently on my channel. I made a video about systemic, I called it systemic exception, that Tesla is an exception to the systemic risk in the AI world of the supply chain, that if growth stops somewhere, then all these companies lose a lot of market value. Tesla doesn't actually lose market value if they continue building chips, but the growth stops. Tesla still grows. Everybody else stalls, and the valuations are all based on fast growth. So if AMD's supply chain freezes, not that it stops, but it just doesn't grow anymore, AMD's growth story is gone, and they go from 140 or 150 PE ratio to a 40 PE ratio, and that's like a one third of the stock price. Oh, I I I'll take a look at Cerebrus, but I don't think that's going to make my list. What's the market cap, Tesla Geek? And then you look at management quality. This is a tricky one. The reason my criticism of Figure AI is, if you look at the management history of Brett Adcock, I call him Brett Fraudcock. Um, Look at his history. I don't find it impressive. Look at what he did with Archer Aviation. Look what he did with his previous startup, Vettery. He never really delivered meaningful products or services to customers in any scale. That's the challenge, right? It's he made great presentations. He got a SPAC merger he banked all this money. He got the investors. He played the game, and he cashed out with over $1 billion. He's probably worth over $1 billion now, or more than several $1 billion with Figure. He's figured out how to play that part of the game. He hasn't figured out Figure. He hasn't figured out and doesn't care about delivering products at scale to customers or services at scale to customers. Um, there's a good question here. A big flag to me is being in the red while claiming massive future profits. I don't have a problem with that. If the future profits are credible, I don't have a problem with that. Doug says, "How has my experience as a lawyer helped me as an investor?" There are moments in some companies where there's litigation, and there's litigation documents that I get to review, and then, reading corporate documents. As a lawyer, you're trained to understand, to some extent, the legal language in a lot of these documents. So I think I have some advantage there. I think it's natural in the legal world to be very conservative, and I fortunately don't have that problem. I think a lot of lawyers are not great investors because they're too conservative. They're not going to take the crazy risks that I've taken, because it's just the way lawyers are. But I think understanding legal language, when there's litigation, is a big issue. Tesla gets sued or something like that. A lot of people who watch my channel have seen my videos where I've talked about some lawsuit that Tesla's involved in. Um, yeah, so I hope that answers your question. Um, Sorry. Another question, what evidence should make you increase conviction in the stock over time? This is a big thing. Don't just watch the price action and the hype. You want to watch fundamentals, you want to watch execution, you want to watch are they leading in a market? Do they have some sort of position that people are looking at? Do they have strategic advantages, right? We're going to talk about this later. Like everybody says that Anthropic has this advantage in coding, and you're going to see that somebody else is in the lead on coding that you're probably not even aware of it. That's coming at the end of the video. So there's a lot there. You- Um, I just think that it changes so quickly. You got to keep an eye on it. Tesla Geek says, not pumping Zebras. My point is the CEO has been added to my very selective list of people who seem to be legit. I don't know how good your bullshit meter is. I got to use my bullshit meter. Other people got to use their bullshit meters. I didn't see anything with Cerebrus that made me question the bullshit side. It's fundamentally what you haven't answered, by the way, Tesla Geek. What you haven't answered is what is the real market for that product? How big is the market for that product? That's a very difficult question to answer. And I don't know if the CEO can answer that question. And I don't know if you can answer that question. I know I looked at it and I didn't see enough to give me conviction that I wanted to invest in Cerebrus, right? I didn't build my conviction in that. So, which AI companies today are still early enough that conviction from grow here for all of them? Okay, this is a sample question you guys might have asked me. Which AI companies today are still early enough that conviction can grow from here? Pretty much all of them. Um, I think if you look at like Nvidia is the largest company in the world, and I think it's early. Tesla is one of the largest companies in the world. Google, one of the largest companies in the world. SpaceX is about to have their IPO. Expected mark valuation at $2 trillion at the IPO. And Ron Barron just said the Starlink alone is going to be worth 14 trillion in 10 years. And if you looked at my video I just made about their future data center, I just published a video yesterday, day before yesterday. If you didn't watch it, I think is one of my best videos yet. Although 14.4 is going to say my use of AI B-roll was bad. If you check out that video and you understand that video, the value of SpaceX is an AI company. They just happen to own rockets and satellites, but they're an AI company now. The majority of their revenue is AI. With the Anthropic deal, the majority of their revenue is AI. They're going to build a new data center. It's going to be 10 times as powerful as the current data center in terms of tokens or whatever you want to measure it. They're going to make even larger margins on the next data center. They're going to have they're going to 10x their revenue on data centers in like a year or two. Right? They're already majority AI revenue. Oh, okay. So with that said, we've talked about. I don't see. I think I've addressed your questions. So I'm going to move on. This is the AI stocks report, so we should get to the AI stocks report part of the video. Um, we're going to talk about AI news. We're going to talk about current market developments. We're going to talk about ongoing AI stock discussion, broader live stream topics. So let's get into this. So first of all, I have a new graphic. Before we just had the ASI. Let me just explain. On the far end there is AISRX, which is the original index I created, which is of 8 publicly traded companies that are different layers of the AI stack. So the first one is AMD, NVIDIA, and AVGO is Broadcom. They are the chip makers. TSM is a chip fab company. ASML is in the supply chain for TSMC, for the chip companies. Palantir is an application layer. Google is at multiple levels of this. Google is at multiple layers. Tesla, in a way, is at multiple layers. Tesla's on the application layer, but they also have data centers, and they also have their own real-world AI model, which is different from an LLM, but they have their own AI model that's the best in the world at real-world AI. And then, like I said, Google's at all kinds of levels. So the top chart is what happened in the last day, and the bottom chart, this is for the weekend. For my Sunday lives, I do the week, right? I might do this for Monday mornings in the future too. I might use this for Monday morning. I think the market's closed Monday morning, so I might do this Tuesday morning again. But you can see how they did for the week. So you can see that AMD was up 4% on the day. And sorry, and this side right here is the secondary list. I removed Samsung from it because I couldn't pull quotes. Samsung was on my list of secondary companies, but I couldn't get accurate price data for Samsung. So, ANET and Marvell and VRT are in the infrastructure networking layer, supplying hardware for data centers, and VRT is more like energy. Oracle, Meta, Microsoft, and Amazon are hyperscalers. They build big data centers. Meta also obviously has other business. Amazon also has other business, but in this AI space, they're focused on that. Meta uses AI in its other business, but their primary business as it relates to AI is being hyperscalers, selling access to their data centers to others. Xiaomi is a Chinese company that is a leader in AI and also in EVs and electronics in general. So they have one of the better models in China, and they're like the only company I could find in China. I wanted to keep an eye on them and keep an eye on China. And then Micron Technology makes memory. Samsung makes memory. SK Hynix makes memory. I couldn't get SK Hynix in there. And so the bottom chart is how they did for the week. So you can see Marvell Networks was up 16% on the week. Micron Technology up 10%. Huge shortages of memory. So like, where are the choke points in the AI supply chain? And high bandwidth memory, HBM memory, is one of the key choke points right now. Um, and then you can see like AMD was up a lot on the week. AMD has been super volatile. Their PE ratio is so high, I think they have to be super volatile. They make Tesla look stable. They make Tesla look not volatile. ASML, oddly volatile. ASML is just a really simple, picks and shovels company that makes the electrical. They're the monopoly. They make the lithography machines that make all the chips work, and they're solid. Their business is going great, and we'll see. Jim says, "Good idea to move to Tuesday, as most people are partying on Memorial Day or sleeping in." Yeah, this just the idea of the AI stocks report on the weekdays is to prepare people for the market. And the market's not open on Monday, so I might as well take a day off. It's not a holiday here in Thailand, but we're gonna go visit my wife's father. So we're gonna cover some AI street buzz. So the biggest movers you saw on the chart, I'm gonna talk about the biggest movers looking forward. So AMD is focused on follow through from their strong recent data center guidance and the agentic AI CPU momentum. Several analysts have been raising their price targets on AMD sharply into the 375 to, let's look at their prices. So AMD is trading at $467, and analysts are raising their prices into the $375 range. They're already above $375. Um, I haven't seen any recent analyst reports, so I'm not sure where that buzz comes from. Traders are watching I think the big thing is, what are they looking for going forward? They're looking for any fresh updates on Meta's multi-gigawatt AMD Instinct deployments or Oracle's Helios superclusters. So AMD, NVIDIA is the 800-pound gorilla when it comes to chips. NVIDIA at the chip level selling it to customers, and TSMC is the 800-pound gorilla and making the chips. And then ASML is the 800-pound gorilla of the supply chain for lithography. They're like the million-pound gorilla. So everyone buys NVIDIA chips. There are some companies that are saying, we're going to buy a lot of AMD chips. We're going to buy a lot of Trainium chips. We're going to buy a lot of, there's TPUs from Google. There's other chips that are out there. I think it was Gavin Baker or somebody at the All In Pod was talking about this, that all these other, Jensen gets pissed off because all these other companies make these claims about their chips, but they never submit them for testing. And if they ever get submitted for testing, the NVIDIA chips always outperform. And NVIDIA has deep access to all the companies that are using these chips, and they know what everybody needs better than anybody else. Like, they have all the customers. Everybody else has a couple of the customers, so they know a lot about what people need. Mark says that Schwab screwed me out of the SpaceX IPO chance. I don't know how you got screwed yet. I don't know if anybody has access to it at all yet. That's a question we'll have to deal with another time. Sorry. Have I thought about covering Tens Torrent? I follow Jim Keller very closely and look for whenever he speaks, but I'm not aware of Tens Torrent being anywhere close to an IPO. I'm not sure what they're doing exactly. I love Jim Keller. Yeah, Terafab's going to be huge. I agree with that. So, um, so that's just something to keep an eye on. Is like, you're going to see reports that some companies buying a lot of stuff from AMD, and the fundamental thing is this: every one of these companies that make chips sells every one they can make. The question isn't who's willing to buy your chips. The question is, can you make enough of them? If you can't make more chips, then it doesn't really matter. right? It doesn't matter how many customers you got if you can't sell, if you can't make the chips to sell to them, if you can't get it. And who has the best access to TSMC's fab? Jensen Huang. He's been working with them at TSMC for 30 or 40 years. 144 asks, what do I think about NASDAQ changing the inclusion in index rules for SpaceX from a year down to just 15 days? I don't put a lot of thought into that stuff. To me, that's like financial nerd stuff. I'm interested in what the companies are doing, what their prospects are in the future. I'm not worried about, because that's like a short-term investor thing. That's not a long-term investor thing. About retail investor access to the SpaceX IPO, because I see some comments about that. If you watch Bradford Ferguson's recent video, yeah, I think he's got two videos recently. If you are a retail investor in certain brokerages, and Fidelity is one of them, I don't know whether Schwab is one of them or not, you will get access. I believe 30% of the share. Don't hold me to this. I believe 30% of the shares have been allocated for retail investors in these key brokerages. So I am in one of the brokerages, so I should have a shot. I don't know what's going on with Schwab. I haven't seen what the issue is. Um, so I can't answer that. Everybody's going to have their own rules. Everybody's going to have to deal with their own thing. But I do think that it will be hard to get. Like I'm going to ask for $50,000 in SpaceX stock, and I'll be lucky if I get $10,000 probably. That's my best guess. ASML, they were up a lot. A lot of higher price targets from analysts. There's crazy demand for their latest what is it? EUV, it's ultraviolet lithography, high NA. I knew this. High numerical. Ah, I this is like I'm still working on understanding the technology. Numerical aperture, extreme ultraviolet lithography. I got it. Numerical aperture, extreme ultraviolet lithography. Um, there's a lot of demand for that stuff. They're not even making it at scale yet, but that's going to be their pipeline for the future. So investors are monitoring headlines about U.S. export control legislation that could affect their sales in China. They're not selling the latest stuff to China. That's not going to happen. All right, let's keep going here. Schwab contacted me, said if I have $100,000 in their accounts, I'm allowed to buy some. Yeah, I think it's normal that you have some minimum. I don't honestly know, but I would think that would be normal. Okay, Nvidia, the buzz. They just had this is like mind blowing to me, and they talked about this in the All In Pod, by the way. They had a great earnings report. Stock went down. Like they beat, like not just a little beat. They beat a lot, and the stock went down. And the way the All In Pod described it was they kind of go like this, and then they go up. They hit plateaus, and they sort of load up momentum, and then they pop. So Nvidia doesn't rise smoothly; they just sort of go in steps. That's their picture of it, and it's really weird that they didn't go up after beating. Now maybe the markets anticipated the beat, so they came down, but their PE ratio is like a third. I don't know if it's a third of AMD's PE ratio. It's crazy. Um, Markets are looking for commentary on Blackwell ramp progress. What's going on with Vera Rubin, which is coming soon. I think Vera Rubin starts shipping soon, and that's going to be the big driver. How much can they get Vera Rubin out? And they're not going to have a problem finding customers for Vera Rubin. It's going to be like nuts. I don't think the China stuff is going to matter nearly as much as Vera Rubin becoming a game-changing chip for the next generation of AI data centers and hardware. Vanguard is not in the IPO. Interesting. Google had their I/O event. I covered that. None of you guys watched it. There's something about it where like nobody cares about Google. Google is massively underpriced. If you are like me, and you believe Google is on the frontier, we'll call it that. They have a frontier model that's competitive. It may not be the best frontier model, but they're in the race, right? They have a great AI team with Demis Hassabis, a lot of great people. They have possibly the most data centers. They have endless sources of data. They have a great footprint. I'm using Gemini in my YouTube. I'm using YouTube Studio. I'll evaluate this video later, and like 3 days later, I'll ask Gemini, how did my video do? I talked to Gemini about my thumbnails. Gemini will develop thumbnails for me. You guys talk about AI generated thumbnails. They've set up YouTube now, so I can ask Gemini to generate a thumbnail for a video that I uploaded. Right? They've got Gemini everywhere, and that's a flywheel. That's a data flywheel for them to improve their model faster. So, and everyone's. I think there's this thing where people just take Google for granted. Jim says Google is boring and huge. What is their growth rate? So the problem is that a lot of their revenue and profit comes from search, which people think search is going to go away. Like I don't search Google at all anymore, right? So people think that their search business is threatened, but their search business has been stable. Like me personally, I don't do nearly as many Google searches as I used to because I have questions I ask AI. But like 95% of people aren't using AI that much. They're still doing Google searches, and they're still using Gmail, and I still watch YouTube, right? So Google has a lot of stable revenue, and at the same time, they have massive growth with AI. Um, so the markets didn't react well to Google I/O, and I don't get it. I think Google is doing really well. Mark says Google is stupid, but I need them. I don't know. I'm not into Google as they're woke. I don't think Google's that woke. I don't think they're not as woke as Anthropic. So other buzz, Marvell, which is the second, it's in my second tier of companies. Their earnings are set for May 28th, so that's a few days away. Wall Street is looking for expectations around data center revenue acceleration. I'm sure their revenue is going to be up. Analysts have been lifting targets. So if you're looking at that second tier of companies, these are like picks and shovels. They make the networking stuff that goes in data centers. This is a company to watch. I haven't built my conviction on these companies yet. Like Micron Technology, the people say they're the leader in memory, but they're actually like it's like a three-way race in memory. And then China's building more memory, and how much of a advantage do they have over SK Hynix and Samsung when it comes to memory? And I don't know how. I think they're all going to succeed, but I don't know if they're going to succeed more than others. Um, okay, so I think we're on. So Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, did an interview. I think it's the New York Times called the Hard Fork interview. I haven't watched this one yet. I I pay less attention to CEOs and more attention to the tech people and people who understand the tech. But I think Sundar is an exception. So I haven't watched this one yet. I may have to. It was that funny. Gavin Baker said that, and this is really brutal for a YouTuber. He said there's too many long form podcasts out there, so he has his AI summarize the long form podcast so he can read what was said without having to watch 6 hours of podcasts a day. Because there's literally like 6 hours of podcasts a day, if not more, that you could watch that are really good stuff. Um, Fractal Elf says Google is trying to charge companies a fortune for Gemini. I'm hearing companies are moving to host at least LLMs of their own offset AI costs. I think Google. That's what Gavin Baker said, was that they lost their price competitive advantage. I'm not so sure that's true. I think Google still has fairly good prices for AI, but I haven't. But that's like maybe that was last week and that's changed. I don't know. And there, Gavin Baker. We're going to talk about Gavin Baker in a minute. He said that they made a bad decision on their TPUs, and I'm not sure he's right about that yet. So Sundar said that Google is right there at the AI frontier across most capabilities, but a bit behind in agentic coding. This is one of those things where like um, everyone's talking about agentic AI, which is you have an agent, you tell it to do a bunch of stuff for you, and it's able to string tasks together or something like that. And I actually think that the agentic, I'm not sure. I haven't persuaded myself that agentic AI is really the big future of AI. I think that it may be a very large niche in terms of the users are going to be very intense users. But I don't like I've tried to figure out how I would use agentic AI for myself, and I see a couple special use cases that I have where I would use it. Building structured vocabulary for my language learning apps. Building a structured scheme to hold that data in a certain way, and it turns out that just asking an AI to build 10,000 vocabulary things, they won't be successful. You have to do it like 20 at a time, so you need an agent to repeat. Right? So I may be doing that soon. But like having an agent go through my Gmail and my calendar and start doing stuff for me, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think most people are comfortable with that. I think there's a limit to where that's going to go. Maybe in company, and then you give them too much power, and then all of a sudden they do something wrong with it. I don't know. Um, he outlined how AI agents are being deeply integrated in Google search. Address public anxiety around AI by emphasizing that the product usefulness and real world value will be key to building trust and overcoming skepticism. They talked about it. Chamath is beating that drum on the All In Pod. We got to stop whining about job loss and AI is going to kill us all and start talking about the benefits. Like, here's this guy who cured his daughter by doing AI research himself and finding the right drug, and now he's doing more research to see if he can get an even better cure for his daughter. Um, Agentic is a wave, but you have to sit on it. I don't know. And he discussed it nice for new graduates. That's it's probably worth checking out Sundar's interview. I don't know if I'm going to get to it. I'm going to try. That's like I'm not sure that's making my list of things I need to do. Um, Other news: Nvidia delivered their beat. We talked about that. I have a video about that. I'm not going to beat a dead horse about Nvidia. I've talked about it plenty. Um, I don't know why, but Nvidia is almost in Google's category of like people just take it for granted, and it's not where it. I this is why I am invested in Nvidia and Google because I think they're undervalued relative to the other AI companies. I think Google is very likely to win. Elon says that Google's likely to win. There's a lot of winners, but Google's going to win big, and Nvidia's going to win big, and they're underpriced. It's my opinion. Do your own research, build your own conviction. We'll come to my Micron thing next. I have a good question from Nil. Can I go into more into AMD scaling hurdles? So all the companies have a problem scaling growth. There's supply chain issues. There's can you get access to fabs? Can you advance your technology to the point where you're making it better enough to be competitive? I think everybody's making stuff that's good enough, but can you get access to the fabs? Can you get access to memory? Can you get access to the networking equipment to build your servers, your racks? All these things are hard. And are you better at it than Nvidia? They're not better at it than Nvidia. And they're not necessarily bad. At least they have a good CEO. They have a good company. They've been executing pretty well, but that's a challenge. Hmm. Zago says Google and Meta have lied to me in the past. Never would I ever use nor invest one penny in either evil entity. Zuckerberg is a commie and suppressed free speech during COVID. Never again. Well, I don't advocate investing in Meta. Meta is not in my top tier. I I've been very I use Meta AI occasionally. I do these tests where I ask AI a question and Meta is like the worst, like well below everybody else. Um, Managing the agentic AI process is what I mean to get results. It's not fire and forget. Yeah, well then what? Then agents don't solve that much of a problem. If you have to if you have to monitor them all the time, they're not solving that much of a problem. Yes, Starship did have a great launch. That was fun to watch. I didn't even talk about the Starship launch. That's not even on my list of things to talk about. So, um, anyway, let me get back to the news. So, Micron CEO was interviewed on by Bloomberg. He said AI memory shortage is unprecedented, expected to persist well beyond 2026. This is something that can hamper everybody's growth. I watch this supply chain. Can you get enough lithography machines? Can you get enough memory? So Elon for the inference hardware for AI 5 for Optimus and the future of what Tesla is doing, they're using DDR memory, which is not as limited as HBM memory. A lot of the companies are relying on HBM memory, which is better in a data center in some ways, but they're building AI 5 chip with more SRAM on the chip, and that means they don't need to use HBM memory. I don't claim to understand all the technical details, but Elon said, "I see this problem coming. I'm going to route around it." Can other people route around those details? Um, Micron is expanding DRAM manufacturing capacity, securing long-term supply agreements with customers, provide predictability. AI data center is the primary driver. Let me get to this question here. When do I see a merger between Tesla and SpaceX? I am a contrarian on the Tesla SpaceX merger theory. I am not convinced it's going to happen at all. Chamath, friend of Elon, is convinced it's going to happen. Many of my friends are convinced it's going to happen. It's not in the IPO documents. I have a video about that. That's one of my stronger performing videos recently. My video that the IPO documents show no signs of a merger. And my opinion on it is this: if you buy into the SpaceX IPO, and then not long after SpaceX merges with Tesla, and it wasn't disclosed in the IPO documents that they were thinking about doing that, and then something goes wrong and the stock falls because of the merger with Tesla, which is a risk. Clear could be a macro thing, something in the macroeconomics that affects things, and that causes the stock to go down, and it can be reasonably connected to the Tesla merger, acquisition, whatever. Then there's going to be lawsuits against the SpaceX board and the SpaceX company for class action lawsuits, and they're going to win. So now you have the question: how long do they have to wait before they merge? Long enough that it's really hard to talk about it now. I would say they have to wait at least a year after the IPO is complete before they think about that. And I'm not convinced it's necessary. People will say, one of my favorite things about the merger ideas, people say, well, there's synergies. Synergies is a word that MBAs use when they don't have an answer for what the benefits really are. Like every people just want it to merge because they want it to merge. No, nobody's ever made a credible case to me they need to merge for this reason. They're working together. They've always worked together. SpaceX rockets have Tesla batteries in them. SpaceX launches when they have astronauts, they drive them out there in a Model X. Cybertruck is made with steel that was designed by SpaceX. SpaceX does the material science work for, the new, a lot of the new technology that Tesla does. Whenever they have some sort of high tech stuff that needs new materials, the SpaceX material science team does that. All his companies cross over and help each other. Um, Redirect and AST Mobile any good? I've looked at AST. I think you mean ASTS, the stock. The stock ticker is ASTS. I don't know about Redirect. Um, ASTS is, I looked into this fairly deeply. They are a company that are building a satellite network. I think their business model is they have larger satellites with more power that will enable them to connect with cell phone users better than even SpaceX Starlink's next generation satellites that haven't been launched yet. But the volume of satellites they will have in orbit, if everything goes if they execute really well, and I think their execution has not been perfect. I'm not saying the execution's been bad. I don't know if the execution's really been nailed yet. If they nail their execution, they'll have like 60 satellites in orbit, which just isn't enough. SpaceX already has like 10,000 satellites in orbit. And they have each satellite can do more, can cover more area and so on, but the volume of satellites you're going to need to be able to meaningfully serve the cell phone market at scale is going to be large, and I don't know if they have the funding to pull it off, and I don't know if what they're offering is that much better than what SpaceX offering direct to mobile. And then it's like, how often do you not have good cell phone coverage? I'm not. It's and nobody else has ever launched a successful satellite network for communications like this, so it's tricky. I'm not convinced. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just not convinced it's right. Um, I said that the IPO document said, just to be clear about this, Victor says, as I said recently, IPO documents had to have something about a merger. I said if they were going to do a merger, they would have to put it in the IPO documents. I've seen people say, well, they can't put it in the IPO documents because then the merger would be rejected. They can't put it in the IPO documents because then the IPO would be rejected. Rejected by who? There's no rule saying you can't say we're thinking about merging with another company in an IPO document. People just make stuff up. What's the law that says you can't mention your potential merger in your IPO documents? It's ridiculous. Fractal says once the SpaceX stock runs up and then falls, say a year from now, then a merger will take place when the ratio is more favorable to Tesla holders. I don't think that SpaceX stock is necessarily going to fall. I mean, if they're executing on AI data centers and they're executing on Starlink, $2 trillion is massively undervalued. Okay. SpaceX requires US citizenship to work there due to security concerns. Tesla does not. I think the US citizenship is required on the national security areas of SpaceX. I don't think the XAI people or the X people have to have the citizenship. It's within the rocket area. Recent Starship launched, two of the payload were real. They weren't real satellites. They were just they had cameras to film something. They were not on an orbital trajectory, so none of the satellites will stay in orbit, if I understand correctly. Redwire. I don't know about Redwire. Okay, so I think we covered Micron. Last bit of news, then we're going to move on to one last thing. We're going to move on to the Pod Watch. Um, Hyperscaler AI infrastructure spending remains elevated. Amazon Trainium showing triple-digit growth. Amazon Trainium it's another chip that's designed for AI data centers, similar to Google's TPUs, and I think Microsoft has one. I forget what Microsoft's one is called. Um, Questionable whether these are as effective or as cost effective as what NVIDIA is putting out. Vera Rubin is going to be, it's not just like the cost, it's like how energy efficient is your chip. So Amazon reported its custom Trainium AI chip business growing rapidly, nearly 40% quarter on quarter with an annual revenue run rate exceeding 20. So again, can you get access to the fab? Can you increase your volume of production enough to do what you want to do? Latest Trainium 3 generation largely sold out. Sold out because you can't produce more, right? When you hit your the issue is not can you get customers. The issue is how much can you produce. I can't beat this drum enough. Momentum aligns with broader hyperscaler capex signals. Yeah, all the hyperscalers are. I think Calacanis on the All In Pod said something like, "You're going to see a total spend of like $1 trillion," and then SpaceX is going to jump in with another like 50, 60, 70 billion dollars for their next data. This is my recent video. Underscores continued strong demand for NVIDIA GPUs and custom silicon across the AI infrastructure stack. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about Gavin Baker. I mentioned him before. Let's talk about Gavin Baker here. Okay. Um, so Gavin Baker is like a investor VC guy. I'm not sure what else his background is. I should know more his background, but he he talked about a bunch of things, both on I forget what the other podcast was. It was the Invest Like the Best podcast, and then he was on the All In Pod. I just watched the All In Pod shortly before before doing this live stream. I'm now too what? I'm now too technical for the hater trolls. I love that. That's funny. Um, he said power and wafers are the two fundamental physical bottlenecks that will define the next phase of AI. I don't agree with that. They are they are bottlenecks. Energy infrastructure, transformers, voltage transformers, memory. Memory is a potential bottleneck. ASML being able to manufacture the latest lithography equipment at the scale that's needed. Carl Zeiss making the optics that's needed for ASML to make the lithography equipment. There's so many. This supply chain is complex. There's so many parts of the supply chain where there's like one, two, or three suppliers. And if there's a problem at one of them, that can impede everybody's growth. So it's amazing how well things are going so far. But, you have like some sort of geopolitical conflict. Like, I don't think the Strait of Hormuz is causing a problem with this stuff yet. Maybe something happens between Russia and Ukraine. Maybe something happens between India and Pakistan. And all of a sudden you find out, or, Korea and North Korea have a conflict and it ends up causing a problem at some Korean company or some Japanese company that makes some critical element. Like when there were some Japanese chip makers that made some critical chips for cars that just like the thing that makes the car seat go back and forth in a power seat. Right. And most of the car companies had to stop making cars because they couldn't get these chips because there was a fire at a Japanese chip factory. There's so much vulnerability, and Tesla found other chips and got software guys to work around it. Grokdeck says Elon is already making his own EUV machine. I don't think so. I think he would like to do that. It may be that he either figures out a way to make his own lithography machines, or you think there's people who are researching ways around lithography machines. So we'll see. But I don't think Elon's there yet. I think that's what the first fab is going to be for, is the advanced research fab, to try stuff out to see what they can. How can you get around this bottleneck? How can you get around this area where there's a lot of margins, so you can A, improve your reliability of your chip availability, and B, reduce the amount of money you have to spend on margins for people in the supply chain. Wafers, yeah, well, he talks about wafers. Wafers is one of his big things. There's CoWoS, the packaging that goes on there. There's so many things in this process that can go wrong, that everybody's bets on growth, especially the people who are betting on the fastest growth, like AMD. Um, like I think at the application level, someone like Palantir, someone like Tesla, someone like Anduril, I don't think they're as sensitive to this issue. But a lot of the companies that are growing really fast are dependent on the growth to continue in the supply chain, and I don't know that the supply chain can do it. And it's not just power and watts. It's not just watts and wafers. It's a whole bunch of things. He said the demand for NVIDIA GPUs is really strong. Um, he said that TSMC is NVIDIA's bottleneck. That Jensen goes to TSMC and says, "I want this much," and the TSMC guy says, "I can't do that much. I can grow this much." And so that's one of the things that's holding back all the other supply constraints from collapsing. Is TSMC says, "Hey, we can only grow this fast," but like as fast as we're growing, the growth is being held up by TSMC and others. He said SpaceX is a massive winner with a booming data. Not just him, the All In Pod guys were talking about this, with the booming data center business, credible path to a $2 trillion valuation. Bullish on Elon, calling his track record. He's this point that Elon consistently delivers for investors. Like, it is a religion for Elon that he has to deliver for people who invest in him, and because of that, people are willing to invest in him and his new companies. Fractal says, on the question of sussing out good companies, you'd think a form of first principles thinking would have evolved that's reliable. I think that there are people who have that, but I'm not sure everybody's first principles are the same. I think that's a harder one. It's not physics. It's not the same as physics. Sometimes it's personality and stuff. It's tricky. More from Gavin. He talked about, and they were all talking about this on the All In Pod, that public sentiment in America is turning against AI, perceived as anti-human, which could create political and regulatory headwinds even as the technology advances rapidly. The point of this was you can't stop AI, but if you stop it in the US and you don't stop it in China, then China wins. And you might not want China to dominate AI. You might feel that the Chinese Communist Party is not the people you want in charge of the most advanced technology in the world. And Chamath, I thought Chamath's point was really brilliant. We've got to talk about the wins. We've got to talk about all the great things that AI is doing that's making life better for everybody and stop fear mongering. And then, people like Anthropic's CEO are like fear mongering because they're trying to get regulatory support for what they want to do. This is the Pod Watch segment, by the way. I find key pods to talk about. Encourage you to watch podcast with Gavin Baker, whatever. Global is Mo Blackman. ARM entering the CPU game, is that a competitive threat to NVIDIA and particularly AMD market share and GP margin? I haven't seen that about ARM. I don't think CPUs are the issue. NVIDIA is apparently really growing their share of the CPU market. So I don't think there are meaningful threats to NVIDIA. It's not, can you make a competitive a chip that's as attractive as an NVIDIA chip? That's not the challenge. It's, can you scale production and can you manage the supply chain, the various problems in the supply chain to be able to increase your production so that you can supply all the people who want the chips that you want to sell? If you can't scale your production faster than NVIDIA, then how are you going to take market share from them? Um, NVIDIA's strong earnings overshadow. I think I talked about this already, the way they move. The underlying infrastructure build out remains one of the most important moments in the history of capitalism. Traditional enterprise and SaaS software companies are facing an existential threat from AI agents and a risk that SaaS apocalypse if they don't adapt quickly. I don't remember that from either pod, but there's a lot of companies, Elon has talked about this with macro hard. There's a lot of companies that are like data in, data out, and they don't really make anything physical. And if you build your AI right, you can emulate what another company's doing and doing it at much lower cost. Maybe. I have a whole theory about why AI may end up being lower cost. He talked about frontier labs are now in a new prisoner's dilemma around compute allocation, model development, resource sharing. There's like, how do you allocate, if you have compute resources, how do you allocate it to training a new model? How do you allocate it to inference compute? How do you allocate it internally and externally? There's all these issues there. I don't remember that in his pod. I've seen other pods talk about it. I don't remember that in his pod, in those two pods. Um, in the I asked Grok specifically because he made this point about Google. So he said Google made a decision with TPU 8. There's a TPU 8 for inference and a TPU 8 for training. And he thought that they'd made a mistake there. He said Google had a major temporary hardware advantage last year with superior TPUs, tensor processing units that sort of vaguely like GPUs, but not. While NVIDIA's Blackwell was delayed, this let them train advanced models like Gemini 3 far more efficiently than competitors still on Hopper era GPUs. That edge has largely closed, but Google remains in an extremely strong position because they're the biggest installed base of compute of any player, giving them a durable cost and scale advantage. Google has smartly leveraged its low cost token production to suck the economic oxygen out of the AI system by pricing aggressively. So I've heard some people in the chat saying that Google has increased their prices. I don't know. I'm not, I pay for, I did a monthly like Google Gemini Pro or Google AI Pro deal, but I'm not paying per token. I do have an API thing with Grok where I can use my sense is that Anthropic and OpenAI are expensive, that Google and Grok are cheap, and for the money you get a lot more from Google and Grok than you get from Anthropic and OpenAI, but Anthropic is really good and Codex is really good. Now, I use Codex and I don't use it enough to run up on my limits. I think if you're going full time, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, then you run up on those limits and you have to buy more and you have to buy more and you have to buy more at a certain point. And also they start throttling you. I've been throttled by Gemini, not by Grok yet. Have I been throttled by Grok? I don't think I've been throttled by Grok yet. I've been throttled by Gemini. I've been throttled by ChatGPT. I don't use Claude enough to be throttled by them. Where I tried to do something that said we're busy right now. You can't access this model right now. Right. So that's what they do with you're a paying customer and they say we don't have any compute for you right now because we're serving the people who are paying us more. Jim says no, it's okay. So Jim says someone on X made the claim that the hate against AI was directed by commie fronts like the Union of Concerned Scientists, who successfully helped stop nuclear power in the 80s. Actually, I think the better claim is that the Chinese Communist Party is funding it. Chinese Communist Party has a lot more money than the Union of Concerned Scientists. Mark says a lot of mocking Elon's wealth this week. I haven't seen that. He's going to be a trillionaire after the IPO, right? He will be the world's first trillionaire after the IPO, and he will be a multi-trillionaire in a few years, if not two. I think SpaceX, if you, again, watch my recent video, How Big is Elon's Cluster? If you watch that video and you think about what they're doing with their next data center, it's all over the IPO document that they're going to be doing more data centers. You can't miss it. It is very clear they're raising a lot of money so they can build more AI data centers, and the AI data centers make them so much money with such massive profit margins that it will generate more cash so they can build more AI data centers, and ultimately they can build AI data centers in space, and it's just a crazy flywheel. Bill Ackman exited his Google position after a 3X and bought Microsoft. Oh, yeah, and Gavin Baker was crapping on Microsoft. I don't know. I don't trust Anthropic, but Elon seems to trust them. I think that Anthropic is less evil than OpenAI. There was an interesting question. What if OpenAI comes to SpaceX and says they want access to compute? That was one of the things that people talked about. Like maybe they're going to give OpenAI access to compute. At a certain point, Elon doesn't hold grudges. A lot of these guys, they will like fight tooth and nail, and they don't hold grudges, and they'll make deals. Elon has a big beef with, Larry Page from Google's had a big beef with Elon. But if he needs compute, and Elon has it, if he wants to launch compute into space, he's going to need to work with SpaceX. I've seen some Bernie type hate of Elon's wealth. Not a lot is pure. There's always people bashing that. Mark says $815 billion or so now. Just wait until a trillion hits. It'll be over a trillion after the IPO. Okay. So, last thing. Sorry. So Gavin Baker talked about this stuff, and I wanted to just show this one graphic. Well, that's hard to read. I don't know if you guys can see that. Let me make this bigger. This is a chart showing the performance of higher up is better performing on coding, and cost per token is at the bottom. So the closer you are to my hand, the lower cost you are. The farther out you are over here, the higher cost you are. So Opus, which is, I believe, Claude, their best model is really expensive. Their next best model is still very expensive. Still expensive. ChatGPT is very high performing and still expensive. And then you get to Composer, and Composer has a very, very high performing model that is much less expensive than all the other models. Grok is also somewhere in here on this cost end. And Gemini, I don't think Gemini is on this list, but Gemini is also, I don't think Gemini is as popular with coding. So I just wanted to share that with you. I thought that was interesting that Cursor is this wild card that I haven't really been paying attention to. I've thought about signing up for Cursor. I'm already spending I don't know how much I spend on Grok because I have like this ultra premium account on X that gets me Grok access. I'm probably paying a lot for that. I don't even know. And then I'm paying $20 a month to ChatGPT, to OpenAI for ChatGPT and Codex, and I'm paying $20 a month to Gemini. And I'm so busy making videos that I'm not really using my full OpenAI and Gemini accounts like I should be. Oh, Gemini, I was talking about the limits. I think Gemini lets me generate like 3 videos a day with their new video generation. Grok, I can just generate video after video after video. It's crazy. So what do we got here? Gavin's chart on the Pareto frontier. Do I think Tesla's share price will drop because people will be selling to buy SpaceX? Let me address. That's a great question. I love that question. Let me address that question. Let me be clear what the question is. Do I think Tesla's share price will drop because people will be selling to buy SpaceX? Okay. My expectation is that retail investors like me will be very limited in how much SpaceX stock we can buy. So let's say I have more than $1 million in Tesla stock. Okay, I do have more than, I'm not going to say how much, but I have more than $1 million of Tesla stock. Let's suppose I get access to $10,000 in SpaceX stock and I sell $10,000 in Tesla stock to buy SpaceX stock. That's 1% or that's less than 1% of what I have. Even if I get $50,000, it's not a huge percentage of my Tesla holdings. Now, a lot of Tesla investors aren't going to do it. The ones that do will probably be selling less than 1% of their Tesla stock to buy SpaceX stock because we won't be able to get access to more SpaceX stock. So that's not enough inf push on Tesla's share on Tesla selling. That's not enough Tesla selling to drive down the stock in any meaningful way, right? It's a let's say an $80 billion. Let's say they raise $80 billion in the IPO. And let's say we get access to 20, let's say Tesla investors get access to 20 billion of that because other retail investors get access to it too. Let's say in our fantasy, we get 2/3 of the retail investor allotment and we get $20 billion. Tesla's got a $1.4 trillion market cap, selling $20 billion of Tesla stock. And that assumes we all of us sell Tesla stock only in order to buy it. Right? It's just a trivial amount of Tesla's float. So it doesn't have a meaningful influence on the stock. That's my opinion. Can NVIDIA fabless model be a constraint on company revenue growth and stock depressed? Yes, of course. Every one of these companies, AMD is fabless, Broadcom is fabless. The fabless model, there's so many layers of the supply chain that can be a problem. I don't think the fab is the only layer of the supply chain that's an issue. There's so many layers of the supply chain. Premium Plus on X is $35 a month. You get a year by prepay. I'm sure I paid for a year. I'm sure I paid for a year. I think I paid more than $35 a month, but I'm not sure. I don't have Grok Heavy. I don't have Grok Heavy and I don't have Grok Build. I have Super Grok for sure, yes. Um, Reframe the question to buy on IPO, assume no allocation. I don't understand the question still. I think I answered the question and I don't understand the question as reframed. The theory by the Tesla bulls is that SpaceX hoopla raises Tesla stock net. Yeah, I think there's definitely a theory that excitement over SpaceX launch, Starship success, is ultimately a positive for Tesla because when SpaceX succeeds, SpaceX and Tesla cooperate so much, and there's so much crossover between the companies in so many ways that when SpaceX does better, it reflects well on Tesla. I mean, honestly, I started developing conviction in Tesla. The beginning of this video, the first part of this video, I talked about developing conviction. What was the trigger that got me researching Tesla in the first place? Seriously, it was the February 2000. Was the December 2015, December 21, 2015 landing of the first orbital rocket booster, the Orbcon 2 mission. I said, if they can do that, I got to look at what else he does. And I looked at Tesla because I couldn't invest in SpaceX at the time. And I looked at Tesla and I started researching. And I said, you got to build conviction. It took me 3 months, 2 months. It took me 2 months from when I started researching to when I finally had the conviction to start buying Tesla stock. I mean, ignore allocation. How many would sell Tesla to buy at IPO price? What that doesn't matter. It's an irrelevant question. What difference does it make? You can't ignore allocation. Allocation matters. I don't have Grok Heavy either. When I ask a really cool, was it cool question of Grok? It often uses 5 or 6. I think it uses 4. I think it uses 4 agents at the same time in Super Grok. I use Grok Beta 4.30 beta all the time. Okay, we've gone like way longer than usual. I think we've had a great chat, great conversation. I hope you guys liked the presentation. Please let me know. I did it differently this time, right? The beginning of this video, the beginning of this live stream was very different from my usual live stream. So please let me know what you think about that presentation, how I presented that. Did I do well? I definitely think I'm going to do at least one more video where I talk about winners and losers, and I'm using the same approach. Do you think that was good? Do you think that was bad? Please comment on the video, not just in the chat, because the chat's going to end shortly. Comment on the video. Also, of course, please share this video with others. If you're not a subscriber, please subscribe. And if you're interested in long-term options, please consider becoming a channel member on YouTube, an X subscriber, or a Patreon supporter. You get access to my options videos. You get early access to some of my videos, and there's some other exclusive content that I put out sometimes for both on X, mainly on X and on YouTube, where I put a little bit of extra content on. Some of it I put on Patreon as well. So thanks everybody. What's this question? What is SpaceX IPOs coming in at? I don't know. I don't think we know that yet. Okay. Um, Thanks everybody so much for watching, and thank you to Jim and Mark for moderating. Even if you didn't have to moderate, thank you to the channel members. Thank you to the regular watchers, and y'all have a great week. Have a great Memorial Day. Bye bye, everybody.